I didn't grow up angry. I didn't grow up bitter. I grew up learning how to stay quiet. In my family, silence was praised more than honesty. If something felt unfair, you were expected to swallow it. If someone else was favored, you were expected to smile. And for a long time, I did exactly that. Growing up, my cousin, Daniel, lived just 2 streets away. Same age, same schools, same family gatherings. But somehow, his life always felt bigger. Bigger gifts on birthdays, bigger applause at family events, bigger expectations from everyone around him. Whenever Daniel walked into a room, people leaned in. Whenever I walked in, people nodded politely and went back to their conversations. At first, I thought it was just childhood imagination. Kids notice things that aren't really there, right? But as we got older, the differences became harder to ignore. When Daniel scored average grades, everyone talked about his potential. When I scored higher, I was told not to make others uncomfortable. When Daniel talked about his dreams, people listened. When I talked about mine, I was reminded to be realistic. Still, I stayed quiet, because every time I brought it up, I was told the same thing. Don't compare yourself. Everyone has their own path. You should just be grateful. Grateful. That word followed me everywhere. Be grateful you have a roof over your head. Be grateful the family helps at all. Be grateful Daniel gets opportunities. You'll get yours someday. Someday. Family gatherings became performances. Daniel sat at the center of the table, confidently sharing plans for the future. New internships, new connections, new opportunities. Meanwhile, I learned to nod and listen. Not because I didn't have plans, but because I learned early that my plans made people uncomfortable. The first time I really noticed the pattern was when my grandfather fell ill. He was the quiet backbone of the family, the one everyone respected, the one whose approval meant something. As his health declined, family meetings became more frequent. Suddenly, conversations about the future weren't abstract anymore. They were serious, permanent. I wasn't invited to the first meeting. I found out about it later through casual conversation. "Oh, we talked about the family assets," someone said. "Just planning ahead." Planning ahead. The second meeting? I was invited, but only to listen. I sat quietly as decisions were discussed. Businesses, properties, responsibilities. Daniel spoke confidently, like he already belonged in that world. People nodded. They asked his opinion. They praised his insight. When I tried to speak once, just once, the room went quiet. Then someone laughed softly and said, "Let's hear from the people who will actually handle these things." I understood the message immediately. I wasn't part of the future. I was part of the background. After that, I stopped trying. Not because I didn't care, but because caring without being heard hurts more than silence. The real breaking point came a few months later. We were gathered again, this time at my aunt's house. The mood was lighter, more casual, at least on the surface. Someone mentioned how Daniel would eventually take over certain responsibilities. Another person joked about how natural it was. Then someone turned to me and said, "You're lucky, you don't have all that pressure." Lucky. I smiled because that's what I'd learned to do. What they didn't know was that I had been carrying pressure quietly for years. The pressure of being overlooked. The pressure of proving myself in rooms where no one was listening. That night, I sat alone in my room, replaying every conversation in my head, every moment I was dismissed, every compliment that ended with a comparison, every opportunity that somehow passed me by. And for the first time, I allowed myself to ask a dangerous question. What if this wasn't accidental? What if this wasn't just favoritism? What if the decision had already been made long ago? I started paying closer attention after that. Small comments, side glances, private conversations that stopped when I walked in. I noticed how documents were always discussed later, how plans were shared selectively, how Daniel was always one step ahead, not because he worked harder, but because he was informed earlier. And still, I stayed quiet, because in my family, silence was survival. But silence doesn't mean ignorance. I began preparing, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. I focused on my work, built skills quietly, saved money discreetly. No announcements, no bragging, just preparation. Then came the day everything changed. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't warned. I found out by accident. I was helping organize old documents when I noticed something strange. Folders labeled with names, dates, signatures. And then I saw it. Or rather, I didn't. My name wasn't there. Not on the plans, not on the lists, not anywhere that mattered. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Surely someone forgot. Surely this wasn't intentional. But as I flipped through page after page, reality settled in. Everything had been assigned, and I had been erased. That was the moment I understood something deeply. This wasn't about merit. This wasn't about timing. This wasn't even about Daniel. This was about a decision made quietly while I was busy being grateful. I didn't confront anyone that day. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand answers. I simply closed the folder and went home. Because sometimes the most powerful response isn't anger, it's distance. For a while, everything stayed quiet. Too quiet. Family gatherings became smaller. Messages became shorter. Plans were made without announcements. I wasn't excluded anymore. I was simply irrelevant to them. And strangely, that brought peace. I stopped checking group chats, stopped waiting for invitations, stopped wondering where I stood. Instead, I focused on my own life. Every morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose that didn't depend on anyone else's validation. I worked harder, not to prove anything, but because I finally had clarity. And clarity is powerful. Then one afternoon, I got a call I wasn't expecting. It was from someone outside the family, a lawyer. At first, I thought it was a mistake. He asked if I was related to my aunt by name. I said yes. Then he paused and said, "We need to discuss some inconsistencies." That word stayed with me. Inconsistencies. He explains that during a recent review of documents connected to the family assets, my name had appeared, not once, not vaguely, repeatedly, in early drafts, old records, supporting emails. My name had been there from the beginning, but somewhere along the way it had been removed, carefully, deliberately. I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger, but recognition. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't rewriting history. The truth had simply been hidden. The lawyer didn't accuse anyone directly. He didn't need to. He said the documents raised questions, and questions required answers. That evening, my phone exploded with missed calls, from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in months, from people who suddenly remembered I existed. I didn't answer, not immediately, because for the first time I had leverage, and I didn't rush power. The next family meeting was called quickly, urgently. The tone was different. No smiles, no small talk, just tension. Daniel avoided my eyes when I walked in. My aunt looked tired. They talked in circles at first, about misunderstandings, about mistakes, about intentions. Then finally, someone said it. "Your name was supposed to be temporary." Temporary, as if identity had an expiration date. I asked a simple question. When was I going to be told? Silence. No one answered. That silence said more than any explanation ever could. They hadn't planned to tell me. They had planned to move on and hope I wouldn't notice. The lawyer's involvement changed everything. Suddenly, details mattered. Dates mattered. Emails mattered. Truth has a way of surfacing when people stop assuming silence means consent. Daniel finally spoke. He said he didn't mean to hurt anyone, that he thought I'd be fine, that I always seemed strong enough. Strong enough. That word again. Strong enough to be ignored, strong enough to be erased, strong enough not to complain. I looked at him and felt something unexpected. Pity. Not because he'd been caught, but because he'd built his confidence on something that was never fully his, and now it was cracking. The meeting ended without resolution, but something had shifted. The balance of power was no longer one-sided. Over the next few weeks, things unraveled quietly, not dramatically, not explosively, just steadily. Corrections were made, revisions happened, agreements were adjusted. No one apologized outright,